When we get all worked up, we often lose sight of the obvious, checking to see whether they were trying to get into the right car. Welcome to the Grandpa Channel. We believe we're all more alike than different. Every person has a story, and every story has the power to help us see our own story a little more clearly. I don't know about you, but I've had more than a few moments I'm not especially proud of. Moments when I was completely convinced I was right. Moments when my emotions felt so real that I never stopped to ask whether they were telling me the truth. Looking back, I've learned that when we get all worked up, we often lose sight of the obvious. Today's story isn't actually about keyless ignition systems on cars. It's about what happens when our emotions become louder than our perspective, and why sometimes the wisest thing we can do is simply take one step back. This is the Grandpa Channel, and I'm Rivers. And this is what life has taught me the hard way. I am not a robot. I get pretty exercised about things. Growing up, when I was, shall I say, dramatically expressing my take on life, my wise and witty father would ask me why I was all worked up, or why I was in such a lather. By the way, lather alludes to the frothy sweat of a horse, not the shaving cream you might lather on your face. I just thought you'd want to know. May I make a confession? I still find myself all worked up in a lather about a fair number of things at the not-so-tender age of 70. You got a problem with that? Actually, there is a substantial problem with that. When we emotionally blow sky high, we lose touch with reality. Painfully obvious solutions to our vexing problems, the problems that have detonated our emotions, mysteriously disappear from our view. Psychologist Kristin Neff, in her book Self-Compassion, describes what happens as follows. Our sense of self becomes so wrapped up in our emotional reactions that our entire reality is consumed by them. There's no mental space left over to say, gosh, I'm getting a little worked up here. Maybe there's another way to look at this. Rather than stepping back and objectively observing what's occurring, we're lost in the thick of it. Neff then goes on to tell a very funny story about her mother and mother-in-law that illustrates how these emotional outbursts of ours can temporarily torch our bone-dry current reality and take our common sense hostage. This story is painfully funny because it reminds me of some of the moments in my life, moments I am most certainly not proud of, when my reality suddenly became a raging inferno and my common sense went right out the window. Here's the story. I remember once my mother and my mother-in-law were both visiting from out of town, and they borrowed my car for an outing with my son, Rowan. I have a silver Toyota hybrid with keyless technology, meaning that you have to hold the key near the car door and it will open. There's no push button or key to insert. This novel technology made them a bit nervous. They just didn't trust it. After going on the outing and coming back to the parking lot, they tried holding the magical key thingy next to the car door, and of course, it didn't work. My mother tries the key over and over again, and nothing happened. See, you can't rely on these newfangled gimmicks. They both got very upset. What were they to do? They called the local Toyota dealership, who told them to call a locksmith. Once the locksmith had been arranged and was on his way, they saw a parking lot security person. Maybe he could help in the meantime. Sir, we're locked out of our Toyota hybrid that has this weird key thing. Have you ever used one of these before? The man looked at the key, then looked at the car. Ladies, you said it was a Toyota hybrid? This car isn't a hybrid. It isn't even a Toyota. My car was actually 3 spaces down. They had become so lost in their reactions that neither of them thought to take a very sensible next step, checking to see whether they were trying to get into the right car. In the immortal words of Charlie Chaplin, life is a tragedy when seen in a close-up, but a comedy when seen in a long shot. The next time you find yourself in a lather, put out the fire, take a few deep breaths, eat more bran, and reconnect with your common sense. Looking back, the story was never really about a Toyota. It was about how easily our emotions can convince us that we've already understood what's happening. We've all been there. We've replayed the conversation. We've assumed someone's motives. We're convinced ourselves that there's only one explanation. We have a phrase in our family that isn't meant as a compliment. Always certain, but not always right. I wish I could tell you none of us have ever earned that title in our family. We all have. And all the while, the answer may have just been sitting a few spaces away. Maybe that's why my father used to ask me why I was all worked up. He wasn't dismissing my feelings. He was reminding me that perspective has a way of returning when our emotions begin to settle. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is not react. It's to pause long enough to make sure we're trying to unlock the right car. If you'd like to sit with this a little longer, there's another conversation this week about why creating a little distance from our emotions can help us see ourselves and others more clearly. And if you'd like to reflect on the moments in your life when you've been a little lathered up and common sense has stormed out of the room, we've created a reflection journal with just a few prompts inspired by today's episode. You'll find it in the description. That's why we do this. We believe we're all more alike than different. Every person has a story, and every story helps us understand our own story a little better. Keep looking for the stories that connect us all. Until next time, this is Rivers from the Grandpa Channel, signing off.